Hi, I'm Corinne Lesh with FedScoop, and I'm here with Robin Thottungal, Chief Data Scientist for EPA. Hi, Robin. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning. Thank you.
So tell us a little bit about how big data is impacting your agency.
So, from an EPA perspective, the big data, let me define the term first, because people think when people hear the term big data, they start thinking that, okay, it's a large volume data set, right? So from our perspective, it's not only the size of the data. So in our case, we are seeing the increased use of sensors. So that is not only generating large volume data set, that is generating data that is in large velocity. So to give you an example, similar to your Twitter feed or similar to any of your feeds that you're reading on your smartphone, it's just buzzing all the time. Similar to that, we are looking at some of these sensors as a mechanism for regulating or looking at the air quality or water quality across US on a real-time basis. So from that perspective, big data is being created in multiple ways. One is we are seeing an increased value or increased use of electronic reporting. That creates a lot of states or regulating entities submitting data online, which means we are getting more and more information from the different facilities across the United States. So that is one aspect where we are seeing a large volume of data coming in. The second one, as I talked about, is the sensors. Sensor-based environmental monitoring is creating a situation where EPA needs to start thinking about how are we going to store large volume data and how are we going to deal with large velocity data that is throwing at us. So similar, classic example is think about people, 100 million people throwing balls at you at the same time, and you have to make sure that you catch all of them. So same situation is creating, only difference is instead of balls, it's just the sensor information coming to us. So we have to deal with that problem too.
And so what sort of innovative approaches are you using to deal with the data?
So in that classic case, as you can imagine, the traditional systems, like traditional relational systems, cannot be used in this situation because we have to deal with a large volume unstructured data and large volume data set that has some level of a flexibility, because one sensor might be setting a specific information that might not be the same one from another sensor. So that requires an architecture that has some kind of a schema-less capability. So what we are doing is that naturally lend itself to the big data ecosystem that is that is being adopted by most of the companies across the globe, and invented by companies like Google and Facebook and LinkedIn. So we are also implementing platforms that is similar to what Google has or Facebook has, that is capable of dealing with large volume data set, storing large volume data set, as well as capturing large velocity data set into the stream. And on top of that, what we have to do is, it's one thing to get the data into the enterprise and then store it. It's another thing to start thinking about how are we going to generate value on it. So it's not only we are capturing the data in the right format, we are also starting to think about how would we put the compute layer on top of it.
Okay. What are the sources of the data your agency is using?
So sources of the data, coming back to where we started, if you start thinking about it, source of data can be coming from the facilities or the different regulated entities within the United States submitting the information to us. So there is two ways in which usually we get that kind of data set. One is coming out of the states. So let's say if there is a company A which is submitting the information to state A, and then state A will submit that information to the EPA. So that is one pipeline through which we are getting some of these data sets. And another one is, if you start thinking about some regulations does not require you to go through the state. They directly submit the information to EPA. That's a second pipeline. The third one is sensors, which is submitting information directly to the EPA or to a platform that is able to capture that information. From there, we are using that. And so we are getting multiple ways of getting the data set, and one thing I want to make sure that I don't miss out here is, this is the whole regulation and the compliance and enforcement side of EPA, but EPA also has a research division which is focusing on trying to understand what is the implication of some of these chemicals that is coming into the environment, or what does it mean to have some long-term exposure to the chemicals. So what the scientific community has been doing recently is they are using high-performance computing, and they are using other computational techniques to do simulations and modeling that is generating also a high volume data set. And then what we are trying to make sure is the data that is related or coming out of these simulations can be used for analysis. So how do we store that information in a format that we can distribute it for a distributed computing platform? So I just want to make sure that the community is aware of the fact that EPA people start thinking about, okay, we are a regulatory agency. Yes, we are a regulatory agency, but we have a research division, which is also generating data coming from research through modeling. And the classic case would be climate modeling or toxicity modeling about how toxic a chemical is. So these kind of research is also creating large volume data set for us.
And how does your agency protect citizens' privacy while still making the best use out of the data?
So interestingly, if you start looking at a significant portion of the data that we have, some of them can already be automatically classified as an open data set. So the whole issue of, so for example, if you talk to the healthcare people, they will say that they have to deal with the PIA information because some of these information that comes to them already has a person in that pipeline, right? For us, it's more than for us. It's not like that. It's mostly like, okay, let's say there is an oil well in Texas that is releasing this amount of chemicals, right? So the whole problem of dealing with PIA does not affect us that much. But that being said, there are some information that is more secure that we need to have. For example, classic case is some of the regulating component of EPA collects information about some of the chemicals. Right, the trademark. So there is that information that needs to be really stored in a secure environment. So currently what we have done is we have a specific detached environment where we are storing these kind of highly secure data set so that it's not even visible from our typical network. So that's the current approach. But what we have to think about is how would we bring that data set together with the external data set that is beneficial and maybe start thinking about a bigger picture. So that's a conversation that we have started having within the agency to see how we would do that.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.
I'm Corinne Lesh with FedScoop. Thanks for watching.